Hello and welcome to Simplified, the show that is guaranteed to leave your mind in pristine condition without actually trying to improve it or anything else. But
Again, Naren, don't improvise on this because it genuinely felt like welcome to Simplify, the show that will leave you. And that's,
But this actually reminded me of.
Are we started really, or are we?
Yeah, this is it, bro.
Okay.
what? This is the second half. Their ad break finished also.
No. I was like, I thought we paused after. I thought you were telling Naren not to start like that, and we were going back again.
It's all part
Oh
of it.
no.
This is part of it.
if you see a simplified host furtively and guiltily slinking off somewhere, it usually means that someone has approached that simplified host and told him that simplified has actually given him some knowledge. So that's like that's how it works.
Yeah. What you said, Naren, about leaving it in pristine condition reminded me of my TV. Like one panel suddenly conked off and like it just went blank. So I called obviously the LG guy. He came and I was like, okay, cool. Like he's going to repair it. He took it off the wall. He unscrewed everything. He literally looked at it and then he screwed everything back and he put it back. I'm like, listen, you fixed it. He's like, no, this is not fixable. Like, I've just come to give you that information. I wasted 1 hour of your time to give you exactly nothing. Which seems like pretty much what we do here at Simplify. Just a reassurance to know that it is okay to be ignorant about this.
We unscrew things, we screw things. And at the end of the day, we're wasted an hour.
Yeah, we're screwed up as well.
There is this play called The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. In that, there is a line. It's something like this. Ignorance is like an exotic bloom. One touch of knowledge and the bloom is gone or something like that. Yeah. So you don't want to. It's a thing of beauty, ignorance, right? So you don't want it to go. Yeah.
Because not too many people know of the slightly lesser known play, The Importance of Being Oscar, which was written by Ernest Hemingway, but this is another story for another day.
That said, important point is this. Yeah, so there is a story about the Buddha, right? So the Buddha was going one day through a village and there was, so the villagers welcomed him and then they told him, Buddha was being Buddha, very calm and content. They said, we have a little sort of grove here where the children used to play, but it's now inhabited by poisonous snake, a cobra, who keeps hissing and, biting people and killing them. So all the children are terrified of playing there. So the Buddha says, let me go and talk to the snake. So he goes and he is divine, right? In the presence of his divinity, the snake prostrate himself. I mean, I don't know, they don't stand up in any way, but whatever he sort of says that, oh Lord, I will, So the Buddha says that, please don't kill people. Don't hurt them. So he says yes. And then after many months, the Buddha is back in that area. And this time he sees that children are indeed playing in that grove and they are kicking something around. Goes there and sees, he finds that snake, that same snake which was the terror of the neighborhood, now being mercilessly kicked around, is battered and bruised. So Buddha is overcome with compassion. He says, what happened? Why are you like this? He says, no, Lord, you told me not to bite. So I stopped biting and now everyone kicks me around. So Buddha says, I told you not to kill anyone. It doesn't mean you can't hiss and threaten people. So you can continuously do that. So to sort of my point is this. It's absolutely admirable to be ignorant and preserve that ignorance, but it's absolutely not necessary to let other people know that you are ignorant. So that's where Simplified comes in.
Oh, this is still the intro. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the snake got fired from Twitter.
Fabulous. For that one listener who texted Chuck and said that why is the recording not out on Monday, this is what you came for.
Yeah, we missed one episode. So sorry to all 3 people, I guess, who knew
missed
that was
us.
a thing.
We should mention the other fan who met you guys in real life.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We have another episode for that.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to talk apparently about friendship.
Yes. So today's topic is friendship.
Yeah, we need an introduction, right? We need a...
Yeah. I want you guys to sort of think about the most unlikely friendships you've formed, and just describe that, or whatever you can say about that unlikely friendship, how it formed and how. I'll go first. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Yeah.
A good friendly nudge.
To be fair to the 10 people who listen to Simplified, I sometimes get the vibe. I would listen to the show.
So one day, one guy lands up in my factory, and he is interestingly looking for a Narendra. But I learned later that that's not me. So he comes, he asked me, "Are you Narendra?" I said, "Yes." And then he starts talking to me like a long lost friend, and starts telling me about, taking people's names and telling me about whose friend he is. And I have absolutely no clue. Now, my memory of names and faces is terrible, right? So I have no choice. I have to just go along with. So I pretend that I know everything everyone that he's talking about. And I say, "Come in, have a cup of tea." We sit, and for 15 minutes. He asked me for the name of my company, and then he says, "Oh shit, this is not the place I was." I said, "Okay, that place is there." So he goes to the other place, and by that time, okay, we've already, the bonds of friendship have formed. So he finishes whatever work he had with that other guy, and then he comes back here, and he is my friend for a really long time. Then, not recently, about a few years ago, he passed away. So that's the end of that.
Wow.
But
Wow.
for all that period, he was a really interesting guy. I didn't know him from Adam, and he just come, hang out, tell me the most incredible tales, and just buzz off.
Narendra, this sounds a lot like you. We met randomly. You came there. We met because you came looking for somebody else, i.e. Anand. Every time we meet, so you say some random tales and then you go off. This is you. Wow.
Yeah.
Are you seeing yourself in not that kind of episode?
Passing away part. I hope that doesn't happen for a long. But yeah, otherwise, yeah.
Wrong episode for that. Okay, I'll go next. My first hostel roommate was kind of a nice guy, and later I realized that, or rather he told me that he used to sell or transport drugs across a bridge in Cochin. And at that point of time, I was a poor little sheltered boy, and I was absolutely terrified that this was like, holy shit, like what's happening. As it is, I was scared going to a hostel and things like that. But the fact of the matter was, the guy was a very, very nice guy. He actually came from a background that I didn't. He obviously had a way of thinking and all that, which I wouldn't have. I mean, it's the typical kind of, person who my social circle wouldn't have come in contact with, and I know how privileged that makes me sound. But he'd failed 10th or something a couple of times, but we ended up becoming pretty decent friends for that first year. And after that, I think he either dropped out or went somewhere else. Haven't been in touch since 2000.
Yeah, you've never met anyone who's failed their boards. Otherwise, but go on.
No, man, that's about it. Like, I think that was, if you had told me that one of my, I mean, I wouldn't say best friends, but I would be pretty close to somebody who was doing all the things that he did a year before college, I would have said, listen, I'm staying in 12th only. I'll sit and work at nearby restaurant. But yeah, life opens up experience. Maybe there's something philosophical about that. I will think about that while you guys give me your answer.
Well, I can go here. I mean, I'll probably, it's I won't say unlikeliest, but the strangest reason I kind of formed a friendship. I mean, both strange as well as like a little, what do you say, a little sanctimonious, I guess, in my own way, where just before I was going to go to college in Symbiosis MBA in Pune, I was like, so we were all part of that group and we had all gotten in, and there was I had created a Facebook group where basically everybody came in and we were all sharing about how we're getting through our processes and all the coordination stuff, whatever is there. And there was like an introduction thread, right? And just before the college, they had actually sent us a mail saying that you have a choice to choose your roommate. Otherwise, it'll be randomly allotted to you, right? If both roommates can nail the admin office, then your roommates can be, selected. Otherwise, they'll be randomly allotted to you. Now, here is where I came in. I was like, I didn't want to get stuck with someone who is either an idiot or is someone who is like just out there in whatever way. And this is also very, very harsh standards, but it did lead to a good thing eventually. Where what I saw was there was an introductory thread that we had. I just went through that, and anybody who wrote full sentences in English was the first person I caught. And that was my future roommate who I caught. He just basically wrote in full sentences rather than writing like acronyms and shit pronunciation and whatever else. And then afterwards I texted him and I was like, "Are you vegetarian?" He's like, "Yes." Do you smoke? He's like, "No." I was like, "Let's go roommates." So then we gave our application. Like, we had no idea who the other person is whatsoever, but we were the only people in the whole batch who chose to be with each other. Everyone else got randomly allotted. So yeah, that is that guy who is a very good friend of mine now, Harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the origin story of how Shrikeet became a Bangalore landlord. If I may slightly
Wow.
peek Bengaluru, was it too niche a joke?
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, you haven't been following Peak Bengaluru on Twitter then, because they share screenshots of people who get rejected by landlords because in Bangalore you have to apparently say which company you work for and things like this. Some people even ask for things like this. So yeah, so one screenshot doing the rounds right now is, "No, I worked in Cisco. This person is in Google. This is another thing. We have all 1.5 years." And the person writes back saying, "Sorry, you didn't meet the qualifications," or something like that. Like, dude, what do you need? So anyway, like, can you write full sentences? Are you vegetarian? Anyway, never mind. Yeah,
what else
yeah.
can you judge on at this point? Like, you have nothing else to go by. So I said full sentences might be a good filtering mechanism.
This is a test that you ran, or?
Yeah, it's something I ran where I reached out to him and I said, "Do you want to be roommates?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's good." And later on, I also realized his ulterior motive was he wanted his, at the time, and I can share this now, they've been married for 10 years, but his girlfriend at the time, now his wife, had a very specific criteria for him to get a roommate. She wanted him to have a roommate who had a girlfriend, because at that time she was quite possessive, and she was like, if you have a single roommate, he will lead you astray.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
All these non-engineering college fundas are.
Of wisdom, yeah.
Yeah. So she was very happy that I was the roommate, because I was at the time had a girlfriend. So it was quite a unique set of parameters that we shortlisted each other on.
Yeah.
This is actually much more intense than how most of the arranged marriages used to work back in the day.
I know. We effectively did an arranged marriage when we did our roommatehood. Yeah.
Most of the unlikeliest friendships, actually, like when I tell people I've met in real life, they're like, "How can you make friends over the internet?" But it remains the fact that almost all
There's
my
another way?
closest friends.
There's another way.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Where there's a shop.
Yeah, you could make friendship on Orkut. Yeah.
So many. No, but like I feel like three of you have spoken, so I'll break the format a little bit. And probably the most unlikeliest friendship that I made was remade was with my dad when I turned probably like close to 30.
Oh,
or
so sweet.
Oh, man.
So sweet.
Yeah, I mean, which is like, because he used to be a very, very like big disciplinarian growing up, right? And also like short-tempered and all.
Yeah, I'll quickly plug the latest episode of Seen and the Unseen. It clocks in at some 7.5 hours, not for the faint-hearted.
No,
Yeah, so it's about this very thing, right? It's about this very thing. So, Loneliness of the Indian Man. It's very nicely brought out by the host, Nikhil Taneja, who talks about this. And you are very lucky that you are able to, restrike that friendship. And so here, I read somewhere, probably Steven Pinker or something, I don't remember, back in the annals of history. There are three kinds of relationships, right? So one is what's called reciprocity. Reciprocity is the quid pro quo. It's not a friendship thing. It's like, I give you money, you give me goods, or that kind of thing, right? That relationship, customer, transactional relationship. One is a dominance relationship, like a father and son. Or a boss and a subordinate, right? So there are things you are not able to discuss because of the dominance relationship. And the third one is what he calls communalism, which is where you are equal. It's egalitarian. So neither of you has authority over the other, and there is no expectation either. So, if you're friends, there's no obligation, there's no legal obligation for either of us to do or not do something.
Yeah.
So what Stephen Pinker or whoever it was who wrote that was saying was that if you mix these relationships, it usually ends up in a disaster. So if you're in a dominance relationship and you start acting like you're in a reciprocity or this thing, or any of the three. But the one exception that I think which converts very beautifully from a dominance relationship into a communal relationship is the father and son or parent-child relationship. When you grow up, there is a transition. It's very hard to know when that transition happens. And what Nikhil Taneja, the host on Scene Unseen, was saying is that for many people, it never happens. And that's tragic. Yeah. That's really sad. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's a bunch of things, right? That for it to happen, one is obviously that you need people to continue growing up even when they're older, right? Like a lot of people
That's one.
Tend to become more narrow-minded. But I was lucky enough to have a father who like wants to continually improve, which is amazing. Second is also like coincidence of circumstance, right? Like by virtue of having a child, we were forced to spend time together because like, you know, you need a support system just when you have a baby.
Correct.
Yeah.
So then like the mix of the two, I think coming together was something of a coincidence, but I guess like, yeah, it worked. So yeah, that.
Yeah, and it was nice to see you like doing things like the podcast with your dad and stuff like that. That's quite nice. Yay! Wow, that was a weirdly the roller coaster of emotions. So the 4 answers. Yeah, very nice.
It was so nice and deep, right? So
Yeah.
friendship can be that too, and to be on the other side. So I know a couple of people who are stuck in a set of very bad friends, right? So here's what I mean by bad friends. They're roughly my age. They are among friends who are continuously setting standards for each other and chasing pretty much unachievable goals because it's absolutely not on to, not pursue them. And a lot of misery is ensuing, at least with the person I know. And he's not able to snap out of it. So that's another thing, you need to, at some point of time, so there is this funda by this lady named Paromita Vora, again, who was a guest on Scene Unseen, whose funda was Bore Mat Kar Yaar. Her funda is that life is too short, and if someone is not, the company of a person does not leave you happier or richer, in experience or in any way, it's just no point continuing that. Just step away, just go.
Yeah, a great point there, Naren. I mean, 2 aspects that come out there I wanted to talk about. First, just referencing the previous conversation, I think a very close friend of all of ours, and I think one thing I discovered is not just friends, like a friendship relationship with your parents or your elders in some way, but also friendships that go across age ranges. Like there's 2 examples of people. One, of course, Naren, you yourself, but also a friend of the podcast and Tony's co-host on Bits and Pieces, Mohan, who at one point, like, I mean, I remember this because I was in my early to mid 20s when I met him, and like we went to his, I think Chuck and I had gone to his house, and we were like, initially we were just sitting there, like we're sitting at some uncle's place, right? We're sitting like very disciplined and waiting for water and all that stuff. And then afterwards, he had this brilliant knack, which I had never encountered before in my life, at least, of an older person just completely putting you at ease and making you feel so comfortable as a friend, right? Like, and having an older friend doesn't just come from like, okay, being able to put someone at ease. I think you break it down further. One part which you said, which is about the ability to actually say that, you know what, my age is not like make me better than you, or my age has not made me more knowledgeable than you, and what you can say may have value, and I am excited by your sliver of experience that you're going to share. And the other aspect being also that, like, it's almost like he was also in a space where he was like, I want to share all this with you, and I don't see that you are this younger person or someone else. You are a mature and intelligent person in your own right, and you will have something great to share with me. And that was something and I think it's something I still to this day try to, like, whenever I'm trying to be too sanctimonious or like too uppity about stuff, I just keep trying to put that into my experience, saying that, hey man, it's almost like, what would Mohan do? It's a great angle there. And the second thing that I wanted to point out, which you talked about, which was about the whole, I mean, the whole, I would call it the toxic friendship loop in some way, right? Where you have, like, I mean, I have been part of these things where, and I would obviously don't want to name any situations or names, but just a friendship loop which is governed or fed by either boastfulness of achievement or a series of one-upmanship, right? Where I have won this battle
Yeah,
and you have won that battle and I have won this battle, versus like that kind of equation which happens, which is actually pretty common in India, because it's all about like, oh, how far up the social, economic, financial, whatever ladder that you have climbed, and how well can you showcase educational ladder as well. So it's just that one-upmanship that, I mean, what it does is like I see some people really thriving in those kind of friendships, but what I feel personally, what I've experienced and over time is like they are exhausting, because you will eventually lose at things, and
absolutely.
a friendship is no place to lose, really. I mean, it's just a place you
Yeah.
come to like unwind and relax and have a good time and share and learn and grow, right? Versus this whole, I get the fleeting joy of winning and then the fear of having to protect myself from the next potential loss.
PK, thanks for describing Twitter. And so the first point, no, it's not about just age, I think, right? So while that example of Mohan's is great, but I think like even I'm taking some of my best friends, apart from the three of
Yeah.
you, of course. And it's always like there's a sort of leveling, right? In some sense, like even when I talk to, like, I want to use that example of Mohan and age that you said, and I'll extend it to say Bertie and music,
Bertie,
for
yeah,
instance.
I was just
Even
thinking
though
about
he
Bertie,
is,
yeah.
yeah, even though he is somebody who is so knowledgeable about music and can run circles around you with respect to his music knowledge, I don't think he ever really he never really uses that as a point for one-upmanship in a conversation, right? And I think this is not to glorify Mohan or Bertie, but I think the basis of that's a basis of a friendship in some sense, right?
Yeah.
Where you are able to just talk to each other as peers with nothing to
Yeah.
guard or say, okay, is he going to say that or something like that, right? Does that make sense? I think that's what we were trying to get to.
You don't want that to become a dominance
Yeah,
relationship.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to what you're saying, the dominance relation. I always thought that way. I think you can only be friends with somebody who you can. I think in school we had these sort of heuristics, right? You can only be friends with somebody who you
Yeah.
can say a gali to or something like that, because
Yeah.
now you know at
Yeah.
your level. I remember there was a saying that used to be there in advertising at one point, that you can be friends with somebody in advertising only if you bitch about the common client together. It could even be like you and your client can become friends only if you bitch about the CMO together. There were these sayings like this, and it's kind of, it's interesting, right? All of these are about coming to the same level, so that it's almost like some pretension or something is wiped away, so that you guys can just talk as humans.
Yeah, this reminds me of one of those Woodhouse books where one of the characters, I don't remember, possibly Gussie Fignotle, but I don't know, and striking up a friendship with a female. Either Gussie or someone, yeah. And the conversation is, he, for sake of argument, says Gussie, just as a placeholder name. Gussie said that he didn't like rats, and the girl said she didn't like rats either. And then the guy said he didn't like bats either, and the feeling was reciprocated by the female. She said she didn't like bats either. But on the subject of cats, they were far more, they both liked cats, and that was the basis of a sound friendship. Something like rats and cats.
So there's just on this point, there is a dating app, or at least there used to be a dating app called Hater, which actually connects people on the basis of things they hate. Because the
This is
logic
Twitter
over there was
again.
exactly this, what we were talking about over here, which is you are likely to be friends with somebody if you hate a common thing.
Same
But I think
thing.
something like that is something that comes up in conversation rather than being the sole basis of a relationship. Imagine a marriage being formed on the basis of your
Hate.
common hatred for, I don't know, like Man United or something. I don't know what people would put up in a profile like that. What would you proudly claim to be a hater of? If you had to make that your entire identity. Oh, wait, I'm describing Twitter again. Let's move on.
No, but one aspect of friendship which I've discovered is quite interesting, is that I have a theory, and this is like something that I have like put down. I'm sure someone must have expounded more eloquently about this somewhere else, but I have discovered that I have become friends with people, or at least like struck up like good friendships with people who in other circumstances I would have never become friends with, right? And what I discover here is that I think the circumstances and the tenor of what a friendship, like I think friendships have a certain tenor or a certain rhythm that they get set to, from which is set by the initial meeting and the context of what that friendship is built on and all that stuff, right? And that tenor actually dictates how a friendship is going to pan out, right? And what that does is, I feel, therefore, in the right circumstances, pretty much any person can be friends with any person, right? If they are given the right context,
in the right
if that
circumstances.
in the right
In the right
circumstances,
circumstances.
yeah, if they come together, like people with like almost no overlapping interests. I mean, obviously it's easier for people with a lot of overlapping interests to get together and talk, and that's what happens most of the time. But I have seen far too many examples of people with like not really having many overlapping interests, people getting together. In fact, like you said, like people who match with each other on the basis of things they hate. I think it's also equally likely, not equally, but it's also quite likely for people who are on opposite ends of the issue, because they are having a spirited argument, to actually become friends over it.
Come together over
Right.
it, yeah.
Yeah, so I feel that particular context is so important for how people can get together, and it also sets a tone of saying that, when you feel like there is a certain person, you just kind of going in a slightly opposite direction to what who's the person you were just saying about, like, pick your friends. I mean, don't want to bring the toxic friends in my life. Naren, who were you talking about? No, you just talked about earlier. You were talking about this one person who said "Jane de yaar" or something.
Paromita Vora, yeah.
Paromita
Bore
Vora.
mat kar yaar.
Yeah, bore mat kar yaar, right? I feel, if on a slightly tangential note, if you were to, the other side of the coin is, because it becomes so difficult to make new friendships sometimes, and you're sometimes so unnecessarily selective about who you think can become a friend or not.
Yeah.
I think you may want to, it actually merits having a little bit of patience in giving people a shot, even beyond when you feel like they are the type who will bore you. Right.
Yeah.
And that can actually lead to a very decent friendship. I have a couple of friends who have come that way, and I actually cherish them because we kind of went through that, overcame that hump, and now are actually decent friends because we gave each other a shot beyond what what I would have normally done.
You gave each other a shot at the hump. Well done. Got over it.
Lots of, it's pregnant with meaning.
Yeah, but I mean, basically that's literally why it's easier to make friends is when you're younger, and harder to do it when you're older. Is that structure inevitably leads to sort of more conversations and stuff, right? So I'm guessing at some point in time, your teacher would have mandated that you sit with X person during class. And although you probably like never spoke to each other before that, like after 1 month when you change seats, you actually sort of have become, at least you feel slight fondness for that person, right? Like by sheer routine. Right? Another way in which this happens is like not necessarily office, like commute, people who take the same train or the same bus every day tend to do it. So I mean, basically it's a question of if you don't have any other choice, you automatically will become friends with whoever is around you. Whereas when you get older, apart from office, you don't have too many of those opportunities, right? Like we wouldn't, all four of us wouldn't hang out like this if we didn't have a podcast to record. It doesn't mean that like we don't like each other or anything. It's just that like, you have your own lives and routines to get on with, and then everyone has to make time for each other.
To extend your school analogy, imagine if instead of the four of us coming together regularly every week, it was four random hosts that needed to come together. Then let's suppose Amit Doshi says today, you have to do a podcast with X person to carry on your school analogy, and suddenly you might find yourself running a show with somebody.
Yeah, we definitely wouldn't have come in with zero prep like we do. No, because there's a level of comfort, right? That we can sort of build something from nothing, having done this for a longish period of time.
You bring up a good point on that, which also I feel is an important aspect. I think the one thing that really feeds friendships, and like I have seen like people who are super compatible and could be really good friends like fade away, and like people who are not, like who are acquaintances actually stick on for longer friendships is precisely what you just referenced, like the four of us coming together to do this podcast, right? And these are what are rituals, right? Like you have rituals for your friendship, like you have any kind of, it doesn't need to be a scheduled podcast or a scheduled appointment where you go and talk, but even if you have a ritual of having a conversation at any specific point of time, or meeting up, or going and doing for going and buying groceries together, or going and playing a sport together, or whatever that ritual may be, I think that regularity which breaks that this thing of, I'd rather take a rain check right now, versus like this is something I do at this particular point of time,
Yeah.
is what feeds friendships and kind of keeps them going. And I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
essential, like for a lot of friendships to kind of keep sustaining in some way.
Welcome back. Your podcast's delivery status is now being fulfilled. Yeah, and the harder that is to do, I think that is a theory. I don't have an example right now. I'm assuming the harder it is to do, I'm assuming the deeper the friendship will be.
Yeah.
Like for example, to get together, let's face it, we all like each other, but to get online once in 2 weeks and to do this is not very difficult for us
Yeah.
as such. On the other hand, if say Triket, you and I said that no, every last Thursday we need to go to exactly this gig or something, there's a little more
Yeah.
physical effort over there. And now imagine as we get older, playing in different cities, maybe even in different countries. I know of people who, example, who make it a point to meet up once every couple of years or so. Mohan himself is a great example. I don't know if he does it anymore, but he and that group of mountaineering friends of his used to meet up once a year and trek the
Yeah.
Himalayas. Now, those are memories to cherish. Now, those are friendships that are like really going to be cemented once you have to make a physical effort to go somewhere. I was reminded, like I'm watching The Sopranos right now, and for anyone who
Ooh.
hasn't watched it, what a lucky
Brilliant.
person you are. That's I mean 5 seasons down, and I can see why people call it the greatest television series of all time. But anyway, that's another episode. And it's something very small that touched me, and this was written in an era where the internet wasn't as pervasive as it is right now, right? The daughter Meadow and the mom Carmela, they were going through sort of like a rough patch. But even in that rough patch, Meadow reached out and said, "Hey, it's either my birthday or your birthday, and on our birthday, we've always done this thing. So can we go over there?" I'm like, "Oh man, that's such a beautiful thing," because she came all the way from New York to New Jersey to do this, and it's felt like more personal than say a phone call would have been or something. So,
Right.
just a small
New
incident.
York to New Jersey is basically like Bombay to Thane. So not very.
So very far.
So very far. Yeah, I was wondering which direction to go. But yeah. Point made. Point made.
No, there is.
Okay.
I just wanted to make one more observation here. There seems to be a strong neurological sort of basis for friendships. So they studied researchers studied friendships a lot apparently at different points in age. They found that toddlers as young as 1 year old or something like that end up making friends. They exhibit a preference for certain individuals over others, so that friendships forms there. But the nature of the friendship changes, and they theorize that one of the reasons this changes is something called a theory of mind. So theory of mind is when a toddler approximately at 18 months or 2 years something, that's when the toddler realizes that other people have a mind of their own. Otherwise the toddlers think that everyone knows whatever they know, everyone sees whatever they see, everyone experiences. There's no difference. So for the toddler it's just the toddler's world, there's no other world. And when you develop a theory of mind, you realize that other people have different views of things. Then sort of neurobiologists or whatever they're called thought that this process was completed when the individual turned 5, because that's when practically the brain, all the myelinization takes place. Yeah, synapses, all that stuff happens. But they now feel, or they now have evidence to show that it keeps changing over time. That is why it really changes around teenage years. So at teenagers, so there is a center in the brain called the ventral striatum or something, which rewards you with, if you do something good, it generates coherent electrical impulses, which is the reward system for the brain. And that happens with friendship. And so neurologists think that this is the social brain because it requires coordination between different parts of the brain, which is possibly why I think as we grow older, because all of us, I think, have made really good friendships in the, over the last maybe a decade over the internet. People whom we really didn't grow up with, had nothing in common with, just some liked interests and some shared tastes, and then the internet enabled us to discover each other and hang with each other, and then you develop. It's not that, I mean, 4 of us became friends, but we used to hang around with maybe 40 people. Not all 40 people are just that level of friends that we are now. And why would that be, except that there is something in the mind which is rewarding us from that. So if I'm spending time with the three of you, there is a reward, there is a satisfaction, there is some happiness happening, something very indefinable, very difficult to sort of put your finger on. But so my point is that there is a neurological reward system as well. That was my point.
That's interesting.
Yep.
So I was wondering when the internet would be brought up over here and the effect that that's had on friendship as a whole. Like we probably have more quote unquote friends, but are closer to fewer and fewer people than say the previous generation. I don't know whether that's. I'm sure this has been studied a lot, but it's kind of interesting that this is article I read in the Atlantic just a couple of days back, and this was, of course, thanks to Mr. Rocket Boy's activities over at Twitter. And they said this is probably going to signal the death of the social media era. I'm not going to talk about the article itself again. That's possibly another simplified topic for another day. But it's kind of interesting. Like, what if the world now goes back to not having these shallow friendships, and it's more about the fewer connections again, like the way it was meant to be. Interesting enough, over the last few years I've been seeing a lot of articles like were human brains ever wired for the internet, or did we not even did we deserve, or whether the internet is a good tool or a bad tool. But the fact of the matter is, and we go back to Harari's theories and all that at some point of time, right, which is there are only so many number of people who you can be friends with, and human communication was never meant to be globally broadcast and all that. So it's kind of interesting. What if we actually do revert to an era where there are going to be fewer friendship, where the whole thing about collecting friends and all that, which was a scene I'd say in the late 80s. When you were saying that, Naren, I kind of thought like, oh, it's almost like what Tony said. It's like this internet has made us one big classroom again. And from there, we've chosen a few friends and we become close to them. It kind of seemed like that to me. Because it's unlikely that I would have met at least two of you, actually all of you, if it weren't for the internet in some way.
And sticking on the
Actually, I have a great way to end the show, although we will.
But staying on the Harari line as such, it's about, at the end of the day, it's interesting how, this is all about like creating your tribe, right? You're choosing your tribe in some ways, but it's interesting how like the parameters for tribe choosing have kind of evolved. And as Naren,
That
as we
is
talked
true.
about, like
That is true. That's very interesting.
And also how it's brought about like this entire, how the internet has kind of changed that aspect. And also the parameters with you select, like the example that I gave about how I chose my roommate, right? Like it's about, because of the lack of information that I have from so many points. Like earlier, tribe creation in prehistoric times was, does this dude have good muscle definition? Can he swing a club well? And that's why he's my friend, or he's in my tribe. To seeing if someone
is this guy supporting my club? Is this guy supporting my club? Sorry.
Can this guy get me into a club?
Get a club in. Will this guy get a club into me?
or now that Sriket plays poker, does this guy have clubs? No.
What I think is an interesting corollary here is like, you can look at it very logically and say, this is why I have a very logical reason to be friends with this person, right? But we see the course of a lot of our friendship, while we engineer our environments and try to surround ourselves with like-minded people, friendships are still like, because again, it doesn't purely work out of logic, right? Like there are people who you might introduce to each other and say, oh, you guys will totally hit it off. Like I remember this had happened where a friend had actually introduced me to another mutual friend and said, hey, you're interested in US politics. This person is also interested in US politics. And you guys will guys have a lot to talk about and stuff like that, and kind of put me in touch with them. And I had a few conversations about it. And then I just met dead ends everywhere because I realized that there was no flow whatsoever. It was just not going with anything. Right. So you can logically pair people, but apparently there are so many intangibles, and the way we work is so... it's so something that we cannot process logically, and it's something so intangible in some ways that we get to that. Like, for example, if you look at it as the most enduring and the first friendship of in the world, which is the friendship between man and dog, right? Which is domestication of a wolf at some point of time, which happened by man, where a wolf was just following around man. Logically speaking, it would have been much easier for us to become like domesticate maybe great apes, right? Because they are similar to us and we have a lot of compatible behavior, plus their intelligence is amongst the highest in the animal world and all that stuff. But the reason we kind of gravitated towards the wolf, and there's some evolutionary logic behind that, is because they have skill sets that humans do not possess. And so it's a symbiotic relationship where we give each other
Very true.
points which the other doesn't have. A dog has a heightened sense of hearing, smell, his ability to chase away other predators, and humans had the ability to harness fire as well as feed the animal. So the two unlikely companions, I mean, a human could have been food for the early wolf, but that's where they chose the symbiotic relationship and therefore evolve into the dog at some point of time, because of those intangible factors of realizing that, you know what, this person can actually give me a new facet of life which I've never experienced before.
And I hope humans aren't as calculating as you make them out to be. All great points and all of that. But like just looking at some of the terms for friends, right? Like etymology of, do you know like where friend comes from? I think that's the hardest to get. I had to look it up.
Wow. Okay. No idea. Actually,
I'm not even good at
friend
that.
actually comes, the root word is love. Comrade.
Oh, nice.
You want to take a guess?
Comrade comes from
Camera.
Camera.
Which camera?
Camera is
The room. Like chamber, right? Like
Chamber,
in camera.
okay.
So comrade is
In
basically
camera.
someone
Okay.
who's you've shared a room with. Companion. I think this will be easier.
Who is good
Company.
Company.
Companion. Pan in French.
Oh, bread. Oh, someone you share bread with.
Yeah, someone whom you've broken bread with. Right?
Bread with, yeah.
Basically, I think the thing about like deep friendships is that you've had shared experience at one point, and then like you reminisce it at a later point, right? So probably when we were growing up, it was much easier to go out and play in the playground because you're in school or just outside and stuff like that. And those spaces have shrunk so much of late, right? So much so that now basically all you can literally go and do as a big group is probably have a few drinks, which also lowers inhibitions and allows you to reminisce memories.
Engineering college, I studied engineering. So all my engineering college friendships are basically based on how we all got drunk and fell into X ditch together. So it's remarkable how firm that friendship is, right? It was like 35 years since I passed my engineering, 36, and we are still friends.
This always tends to happen. I think, Shrikant, you and I once spoke about this. Whenever we meet somebody who's part of the old Twitter gang, we always spend about 30 minutes just talking about some of the antics of the like. At one point in time, he was frustrated. Like, I don't want to do this again. Like, it's the same tweets we reference, the same people, the same quirks. You get tired of that at some point of time, I guess.
No, I think one thing that I wanted to sort of acknowledge is probably like our friendships as children were probably very different from what Indian women had access to at that point. Like just the sheer ability to go out and play after school, for instance. I don't think
that's true.
That was afforded to just this physical safety or whatever. Or even like one of my best friends from school is who I used to go to engineering entrance coaching with, right? And we would go after school like at 6, 7 a.m. and get back at 10 p.m. And obviously there were no women in that class because it was just not safe for you to do. So I think there's also a lot of male privilege, at least in India, of being able to create these memories as children. I don't have anywhere to go with this. It's just like
that's okay. You did, women didn't. Sorry, like I had to get that in. Okay, interesting. Okay, this is an interesting juncture. So, Naren, when you pitch the idea of, because to all listeners, we have to pitch and vet each other's ideas before it's approved.
There's a stringent filtration
when
process.
You say
friendship doesn't cut it. You have
to. So when you said you wanted to do an episode on friendship, have we covered what you thought?
No, actually, one thing we haven't covered, I deeply wanted to say was there is a gold ship, there is a silver ship, but the best ship is friendship.
Oh my God.
This is most it was very important.
You wanted to do this just to say that, no?
The woodcutter lost his axe in the river. And then, you don't know, the goddess of the forest appeared and asked him, "Is this golden axe your
axe?" It's a very sad fable.
She gives a golden axe back to him saying, "Is this yours?" And he says no. Then she gives a silver axe and he says no. Then she gives the wooden axe and he says yes. And then she blesses him. I don't know why I said it.
She
Okay,
gave
I
him
was
It's
waiting.
a
three
story
axes.
about honesty is the best
Honestly,
policy.
but what happened as a result of this? Did he like?
He got all three
Yeah,
axes
he
eventually.
got like
Oh, he got all the
because
axes.
he was
Okay,
honest,
so
she gave
he
him
got
all
all
three
the
axes.
axes. Okay.
Oh my
Okay,
God.
fair
and
enough.
got allies also, axis and allies. So this
What? My God. Okay, this is clearly recent nonsense part of
And
the
you know
conversation.
what?
Yeah, he got the x-axis and the y-axis.
If he was an engineer, he got three axes, he would have invented coordinate geometry.
Yo.
Goodness. We have reached the logical endpoint of this. So what I wanted to
No, I think Naren wanted to say something else.
No, I was just saying that the reason I decided to talk about friendship is I've been, much, this has been repeated ad nauseum, but I am actually indeed writing a book. And
Woo!
I was reminiscing about my friends. And I was just marveling at how serendipitous, first of all. It says you just find friends in the most unlikely of places. When you find that friend, you almost never know or never realize that that friend is really going to be a good friend,
yeah,
and vice versa. People you think are going to be really good friends turn out not to be. Like Shrikesh said, you have a lot of things
things
in
in common.
common, but it just doesn't work out. It just doesn't work out. It's not interesting, and that's mutual. So even that person at this moment on his podcast must be saying what a boring person Shrikesh is. So it cuts both
Why
ways.
not?
The other thing is how low maintenance a friendship is. So you could not sort of invest anything into a friendship for decades, and oftentimes the friendship will just come back where it was at the time you
Wow.
left
Yeah.
it.
Better
So
returns than
that's
crypto.
but
Naren, I think, sorry, if I can ask you a question, right? Like, we are not yet in our 40s, so I think we can still see we are exploring all of these. But, like, I mean, sort of things. One is that once WhatsApp came into being, you inevitably formed groups with your school friends, your engineering friends,
Yeah.
XYZ. And I think like there are two sets of people, right? One is people who you were friends with back in that time and have had sort of like a similar arc as you in terms of like probably thoughts or wavelength, etc., etc. Right?
Correct.
And another who basically remain pretty much the same person, right? And I like very clearly know who I'll hit it off with if I meet them now, and it's probably not the sort
Very
of
true.
best friend from back then. So, is that something that you've noticed? Like,
Yeah, so obviously, back in the day, your spheres were very small. You really had not much experience, not much knowledge. You really very, but there was something in the way people, how you carried conversations, how you processed new ideas, how
Right.
you interacted with new people, which told you whether that person is going to be a friend or not. Unpackaging now, I had a very strong bias, still do, for people who are kind, not mean to people. For instance, I was just telling, we went out somewhere, my son and I, with someone, and that person was very mean to waiters. Went to a restaurant, and admittedly, the food was not. It was presented not probably this shabby. Some problem with it. But this person was very nasty to the waiter, and we didn't like it, both of us. And I pretty much am never going to meet that person. Like, I don't want to spend more time with. It's like that. You form your opinions on very slender, sort of very small and insignificant things like that. He's probably a terrific person in every other way, but I saw him being mean to a waiter, so I'm not,
No, it's
so
interesting, right? It's
that
like,
kind of
yeah.
thing.
No, I don't think it's insignificant at all. It's almost like there are certain unsaid values in your own head. Now, they could be good or bad. I mean, according to your system. And the friends that you make could really cut across anywhere. Like, as you were saying that, I was trying to string together all the good friends that I've had in my life from kindergarten right up to now, all of which, if you place them in a room, would look very different from each other. Like, there are some common strains between these. They're kind, or
True.
they have a certain way of looking at the world. And like, that's interesting. So that connects, say, somebody who is quote unquote a recent friend like Bertie, all the way to say a friend who one of my best friends in school, and there were certain things that I can almost see together. Analysis shall be done into this. Interesting, Naren. So I wanted to.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to actually kind of end this with is actually, Naren, you said it almost perfectly, and I wanted to take it from there. Is you said when you meet somebody, you never know when if they're going to end up being like a good friend or not. I think we can say that the four of us have ended up being pretty decent friends. So why don't we end this episode by saying how we actually met each other for the first time?
I know how I met Chuck for sure. We met at Anand
Anand's
Ramchandran's
place, yeah.
place.
Yeah, I
think
still
that's
have, yeah, we shook hands and I didn't
And-
wash my hands for it.
Yeah. No, the first thing Chuck was doing at that, I mean, the thing he was doing, you were playing the guitar, if I remember right.
Yeah, I was, and I
yeah.
remember you came in
And
with,
making up silly songs. Yeah, you were making up silly songs.
yeah,
is what I remember. And it was, we were both in splits. I
Yeah.
mean, me and Anand. I distinctly remember. It was so silly that we have no memory of what
I
exactly
don't
it was.
remember this, but I remember you. I remember one thing that you brought in Ferrero Rocher for Dhruv, Anand's kid. This I remember very
Yeah.
vividly. Naren, I met you not that way, obviously.
Tony, I met over Twitter. I remember we used to have these terrific wordplay things on Twitter. Was different.
Yeah, let's not. No, Naren, no,
Yeah.
not allowed. Let's not do that. We'll do a separate
Yeah.
episode for that.
And
Well,
Shrikesh,
by the time Musk shuts it down.
the
Yeah.
watermelon story, which probably deserves an episode of its own.
Of his own, yeah. So so this is interesting, right? Because so I met Tony famously through Orkut, where this is like for people who don't know the story. Orkut used to be the social networking site back in the day, and there were communities over there. And one such community was a Malayalam poor jokes community. Like, yes, there was that, a Chali community. It was thriving. I remember when I made my first joke over there, and one of the senior admins who I used to look up to said, yes, you have potential someday. You will also have a podcast of your own, something like this. And I met Tony over there. I obviously ended up. So again, right, you vibe with certain people over there. Oh, this person seems to know English better than the others and is making slightly more intelligent jokes. He is in a community called Nitwits, where the NIT is like, oh man, mind blown. So obviously we became friends over there. And then I met him for the first time. Even though Tony and I have zero musical interest overlap, and Tony, I think, has zero musical interest apart from knowing Parikrama songs to make as joke references on Simblified. We actually met for the first time at Hard Rock Cafe in Worli. We were there outside. I don't think he came inside, and he went off with somebody.
No,
That was the
no,
first
we
time
actually met in
and Shrikesh, of course,
2011, I think.
2011. That only,
Maharajas.
Hard Rock Cafe. That only. That was the first time we physically met.
It's like, wasn't it near Kalanagar? There was Maharajas, I believe, was the restaurant.
No, we met at.
Okay.
Never mind. This we'll
Then we
debate
did.
later. One of these. And Shrikesh, I mean, Weekender, like I
No,
mean,
so
just
let me
Weekend
tell
Wind
that
Chimes,
story
yeah.
because I this thing. So basically,
But sorry,
what
one
was-
thing I wanted to say, one thing that seemed to be interesting was like it's interesting how you'd assume that all of us are from the same Twitter circle or something like that. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that Naren became friends with Tony separate from how I became friends with Tony.
Yeah.
I kind of find these overlaps kind of nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, although I was, for me, I mean, I started off by, I found out about Chuck, like, I was a follower of Chuck, so to speak. Like, I initially used to follow him on Pagal Guy, one of the erstwhile great platforms.
Now that was
like
social networking.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I was looking to try and get into the B school Chuck went to at one point of time. I ended up going to the different one, but still, like, we just got in touch and we texted. The main reason I got in touch with Chuck was because I wanted an internship at his organization, and so he put me in touch through that. So through Pagal Guy, he talked about which organization he was on and he was in, and that's how we got in touch. And we first met, though, as would have it. I mean, as was the trend in our friendship later, was that we met at the, I think, the very first weekender. And no, it's the second weekender. I think we met at the second weekender. And
Yeah.
that was Chuck was severely incapacitated but very excited to attend all the acts. And later that night, shattered his hip again. So
Oh
that
man,
was.
I remember that. I
yeah,
remember
so,
that.
yeah. Then afterwards, I think the next time I met you was when I came to Fortis Hospital to see you.
Yeah.
When I was
Good
in
times.
Bombay. Yeah,
Good
so
times, good
yeah,
times.
it was a pretty interesting setup. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to Tony, I think Tony, was one of the many meetups. I think we met at Mohan's place, right?
Must have.
No,
Yeah.
okay. I think my memory is like fully gone now because I
Okay.
you and Chuck together like 2011. I'm pretty sure. I
Oh,
need
wow,
to dig
okay.
this up now.
Yeah, I mean,
Because you were
it's-
roommates with Chuck at that point.
Yeah, I was roommates. Like, I think I met all of
Yeah.
you guys because I was roommates with Chuck. So I can't, other guys, I can't say that there is some great origin story, but Chuck is the origin story for me.
Woohoo. Have we covered all combinations?
All
Yeah,
permutations.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm just gonna repeat and say I met Chuck and Sriket in 2011. Because I'll tell you why. Because you guys were in Mumbai and there was a very thriving sort of Twitter community when Anand was also there and like you guys
Yeah.
used to meet up. And I was working in Bangalore and then went to IMK. First time I came to Mumbai was 2011. So pretty sure like that's the first time.
Although Tony and I have a separate parallel connection, is my first cousin went to B school with him. So
Oh.
Anuradha.
Yeah, this is right. Yeah.
So my first cousin knows him and all that. They went to IMK together. So same batch,
Yeah,
or
that's
she was your junior or something? Or
No, she
senior?
was I think 1 year senior to me.
1 year.
She
senior,
was
acha.
also had the same surname, right? Or...
Yeah, Tadepalli. Yeah, she's also
Yeah.
Tadepalli. So yeah, so she's my first cousin from my dad's side. Yeah. So, but yeah, that was there. And the other lasting memory, if the first original memory I have of Tony was he was in Bombay, but very unhappy to be in Bombay. He really did not
Yeah.
like the city.
There you go.
That was fun, guys.
Yeah, so this has been awesome. So I just want to say that stay safe and stay simplified.